we're just wrapping up this. I actually taught my last class on Thursday. This was week 10 that we just wrapped up, and
Nice.
boy does it feel good. Boy does that like just put a bed, put put a pin on a really busy year of teaching and stuff, and feels good to be done, really.
Oh, I remember the feeling. Um, I just wrapped up my Zoom classes actually, so I guess I have a similar deal. We just finished our sort of spring semester of Zoom uh, because I offer a bunch of weekend classes on there.
Yeah, which one were you like an Old Norse or something or something else?
So I regularly do Old Norse and Gothic now. You'd be surprised at the demand for Gothic. Um,
They come out of the woodwork.
they do. And then a read. So I do these deep readings where I'll spend like 6 weeks with students just reading Voluspa or Havamal in the original and just like
Mm.
really getting down into like what does this mean? Um, and intertextual references and all that, which is always kind of fun. And then I do a like serious study of runes class. Like let's actually like treat this really seriously as an alphabet and its history and
Mm.
look at the I was about to say texts. Text is sometimes generous for some of what we've got, but look at the actual inscriptions and
Mm.
yeah. So those are
Remind me to pitch that. You should have pitched it when you came and talked to my writing systems class. The little promo. Try to get some of those kids to sign up, and
oh man.
yeah,
Actually,
I'll do it next. If you don't do it, I'll do it next. I'm shameless. I have no. I'm
okay.
happy to plug your runes class. That it sounds awesome. Actually, I mean I think it would be fun to take.
Well, you're always welcome to audit or whatever. It's something that I feel like actually could have fit in at UCLA if there had been, interest in like branching out there.
Hmm.
Because people are super interested in runes and to actually look at it responsibly and take it as like a chronological thing. Like let's look at the early, because what I try to do is say, let's slice this off and look at the first century or whatever. Now let's look at the next one. Like let's look at what's happening, what's changing and where. I feel like that's kind of not often done. And there aren't even a lot of books that do that. So it's something I've put together over a bunch of years. And I think it would actually fit in pretty well there.
So, I mean, there's sort of no, I guess, yeah, based on you describe it, there's really no kind of a go-to ref, like you couldn't, like there's no textbook basically that you could approach this with or something.
Yeah, well, there's some books like I'll show you kind of what's out there. Um, there's another one. I think I have a copy of. Oh yeah, it's over there. So in English, there's Runes a Handbook by Michael Barnes,
Mm,
and there just came out, and I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm hoping to post kind of a review of it soon. Runes a Concise History by Tom Burkett.
hmm.
So these are by, professionals in the field, for people that, maybe don't really know what a rune is, don't know very much about it, the inscriptions of the languages. Um, but, by necessity, the approach is a little bit different from person to person. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I have as you know, a super strong comparative interest, that I feel like isn't always there in these intros. I want to
Mhm,
look at it not just as like not on its not in isolation in terms of the language or the writing system. Like I want to talk about like what can we say about this in the context of writing systems, right?
mhm.
What is it coexisting with? What is maybe, not just the question of its origin, which is interesting enough, but is it actually interacting with and being influenced and influencing other scripts in use, for example, by Celtic speaking peoples in Northern Europe? So
Yeah, the Celtic theory. I'm into it. No, I think that sounds like great fun.
yeah, it has been fun. And every time I do it, I learn more too, because of course I'm always trying to like, say, hey, am I lying to people? Right? What do I need to bring in that's been published in the last year or two? And
Mhm.
a lot of the new stuff, of course, is from Celticists. Like there's so much, like David Stifter is
Yeah.
doing so much work on continental Celtic, and there's a lot of interesting new stuff coming out. Karina Salomon does a lot of work on Alpine alphabets. There's always interesting new stuff to say there. All of that
Mhm.
stuff is getting cataloged better every year. And there's new runic discoveries too every year. So
It's kind of this is similar to what we get in the minor Anatolian languages, where you get new inscriptions that occasionally emerge. We had a new decent sized hieroglyphic Luwian inscription that showed up in the last, well, I guess it was published in the last couple of years. So, and of course that this is also complemented by like some new proofed resources, which is nice. Like there's a new grammar. Actually, Luwian finally has a grammar of its own. Just hold on for 1 second. Okay. My daughter was like, I'm gonna huff and I'm gonna puff and I'm gonna blow this door down, or maybe just tackle it. I'm not sure, but all of a sudden there's a giant pounding. You're like, yeah, that's probably not good.
I,
Um,
I figured it was something like that. The
yeah.
Zoom is pretty good at filtering out non-voice sounds, though. I didn't hear any pounding.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that, but I'm hearing it like it sounds like the wall is gonna fall down on me, and just like, yeah, but just to finish the movie, yeah. So there's a new grammar. Finally, the language really actually has a synchronic grammar. It's short, but yeah, Ilya Yakubovich and Elizabeth Regan have this newish grammar. I think it came out in February,
And
and
do you have it?
I have a copy at my office.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But no, not here. And then the thing that actually I still haven't seen, but is nice. There will be yet another new edition or there is yet another new edition of, I haven't seen it, of the little intro textbook that I use, the Anik Payne's Hieroglyphic Luwian Introduction to Hieroglyphic Luwian or something. I think it's the fourth edition of it or something. So there's at least a new one and updated sign list, a bunch of other useful stuff, and so resources continue to improve and. It's nice. It's like it's exciting. Yeah.
That's super. I feel like the field moves faster than people realize it does. Like
Hmm.
I'm constantly kind of like fatigued when I find some new paper or whatever that cites, Norrain or whatever, and I'm like, come on, man. Like
Hmm.
people have worked on Old Norse since the 1920s. It's like
Hmm.
you don't have to go back to the old chestnut. Um, Particularly because some of those old grammars, and I don't know to what extent this is true in Anatolian, but I'm going to go ahead and suspect that it's true. A lot of those old writers basically hallucinate forms, right? They're like doing their own chat GPT thing where they're filling in blanks and not telling you they're filling in blanks. It's like, I don't think this
You
is
find a
tested.
little bit of this, but it's actually not so bad. Like I don't know, there's this at least in the early materials like stuff on cuneiform studies, like people, I don't know, there's such the philological traditions are so old that I don't know, people were very careful. So
That's good.
so you definitely get some of this, but yeah. I would say the biggest thing that's hard about using older Hittite like resources in Hittitology, where it's like is the transcriptional conventions have changed somewhat, and so
Oh,
if you're not work familiar with them all the time, you'll see, I don't know, older transliterations of things basically that sort of that conceal how we now think these things should be interpreted, either sort of phonologically or even with respect to what sort of what words live under these things.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as someone who is, very much like out in the outer orbits of Anatolian, Um, typically, if I'm going to cite a form to put in a video or something, I ask you about it first. Uh,
Mhm.
if I don't ask you about it because it's, maybe very, very secondary, I'm typically going to make sure that I'm getting it out of like Sealer, just so like I'm citing this from someone that I think knows what they're talking about. Because,
Mhm.
I can't look at the cuneiform and judge what to cite.
Yeah, yeah. There's things vary in their reliability, but I mean, most of these Indo-Europeanists who, these standard Indo-European handbooks, they do a sensible job of dealing with the Hittite material, especially these days. So I still think it's continuing to be. I mean, it's gonna. It's still. I mean, there's still a lot to be determined yet about what Anatolian contributes to our understanding of Indo-European, but we've made a lot of progress, and I don't know. I guess I was thinking I've been teaching these minor Anatolian languages, basically Luwian, and this I taught Luwian in the hieroglyphic Luwian in the fall, and then in this winter I taught cuneiform Luwian and Basically, it was like all the other second millennium Anatolian languages in cuneiform. So it was like Palaic, cuneiform Luvian, took a brief look at the Klasma text. Yeah, so I kind of was doing all of that, and there it's like in the last, I don't know, yeah, the last 2 decades is like our understanding of those languages have really advanced a lot. Like people have really invested time and effort into them, and then yeah, and then to some extent there's also new things that have emerged. Yeah, like I said, a
Hmm.
handful of new interesting inscriptions, both in Luvian and Lycian, and other things too. Sidetic, actually, there's some new material that kind of is now emerging. So it's kind of cool.
Cameron in the audience said, I'm somewhat hazy about the difference between the various Anatolian languages. Since we're going to be drawing on these, could you stand on one foot and maybe give us an intro to like what are these languages? How are they related to each other?
Well, how they're how are they
Okay,
related
well, you
together
don't
is
have
kind of like this very vexed question. But like the thing that we all basically agree on, right, is that you have this group of Anatolian Indo-European languages that are all, form a kind of a branch of the family in the same way as Germanic does. And Hittite is probably the most famous and well known of these. It's by far the best attested and understood. And then there are a bunch of others. So in the second millennium, all attested in cuneiform scripts that come to us basically from the Hittites. So like the Hittites were interested in writing down not just their language, but also you know the languages that were being spoken around them. So you get things like, I mean, they write stuff down in Hattic, they write stuff down in Hurrian, but they also write languages that are actually genetically related to Hittite, the Anatolian ones. So this is going to be Luvian, and so we talk about cuneiform Luvian, like the Luvian that is in Hittite cuneiform script. And Palaic is another one of these local languages, kind of spoken somewhat to the northwest of Hattusa, the Hittite capital. And then, yeah, I think last year, I think we talked about this when the Kalasma text emerged. There's just this one little funny text that turned up uh, in 2 years ago almost, and yeah, it became clear that it's another one of these languages that's written down where like a Hittite ritual type context where all of a sudden some ritual practitioner comes forth and speaks in another language to do the magic. And we already know those from Luvian and from Palaic. And so it's the structure makes perfect sense, but it's neither of those languages. It's this yet another language. And we're calling this thing Kalasmaic or Khalasmian. There seems to be no fixing on whether it should be Ian or Aic or whatever. But so yeah, so those are the ones that are all attested in the second millennium in cuneiform. Um, and then and then we have a bunch of languages that are attested in the first millennium. So we have lots of hieroglyphic Luvian, so basically just the same language, Luvian, or a closely related, let's say, just dialect of it to simplify things. Attested in hieroglyphs. Actually, those start already in the second millennium, but then they continue into the first. And then we get a smattering of other ones. Lycian is the next most frequent. Lycian, probably people here have heard of Lycians. They're like the most prominent allies of the Trojans in Homer's Iliad. So, you have the great Lycian hero, Sarpedon, and probably people will be familiar with that. But we actually have a decent number of Lycian inscriptions. Yeah, from the middle of the first millennium. And then it goes downhill from there. Then we have languages that are more fragmentarily attested. Lydian, sort of similar time frame for attestation. Yeah, but we don't, it's very hard to understand. Basically, we just don't have enough bilingual texts to really make great sense out of it. And then, yeah, besides that, Carian, which I just looked at with my class a little bit. Uh, Carian we have some inscriptions in Anatolia. We also have, interestingly, graffiti in Egypt that was left by seemingly like Carian mercenaries. Actually, this is our earliest Carian. But mostly it's all very like, it's mostly just like personal names that are scribbled down, and occasional, one or two words. So it tends to be quite concise. And a couple of others, like these languages called Sidetic, Is another one where we at least have one long inscription and then a bunch of personal names. And there's Pisidian is another one that's a little bit like that, but without a long inscription. So so like they go down in fragmentarily, in terms of fragmentation, and then there's this question of how these languages are all related to each other. Basically, everybody agrees that, yeah, I think those are all the ones I just named, so who have Frederick W. Yeah, so Luvic, yeah, so right, Luvic, right. So in this comment that kind of alludes to how we kind of group these things. Basically, everyone agrees that Hittite is, well, that let's say within the family that Lycian and Luvian kind of go together and belong to a thing that we call Luvic, and there's a number of sort of diagnostic innovations that point to its that the fact that they sort of form a subgroup in the family. Um, and then the question is where you put the other ones. And
Hmm.
and because we understand them less well, it's a little bit less clear. That grouping that I saw flash up there looked mostly okay to me. So many people would put, yeah, like Sidetic and Pisidian, they'll kind of put in that Luvic group. Probably Carian. Lydian is the most disputed one, probably, where there's a lot of arguments about, it seems to have some features of Luvic, but also some things that it does not have, and looks closer to, say, Hittite and Palaic in sort of other small ways. And so it's probably the most hotly disputed. And then, yeah, Hittite and Palaic kind of like live off on their own. Do they go together in some way? Not clear. Yeah, but basically, yeah, Hittite and Palaic kind of floating around over here, and then a kind of a Luvic group is more or less what it looks like.
It's actually kind of analogous to the discussions about subgrouping within Germanic, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can tell some things are really kind of out on their own, right? North Germanic, East Germanic, it's like, okay, those are definitely subgroups. And then West Germanic is kind of fuzzier, like, well, is
Well, it's
this
the
one
same exact
thing?
problem. I actually have a student working on who's going to work on this for his doctoral dissertation,
Hmm.
and the big issue is the exact same one as in Germanic, and people are trying to figure out how to address, which is like it's very clear that you have differentiated languages already in the middle of the third millennium. But then there was like after the split of what we call sort of the unity stage of Proto-Anatolian, the common ancestor of all these Anatolian languages, like these languages, these people are all still talking to each other. And so
Hmm.
you have things that look like features spreading by aerial contact. And so this of course screws up how we draw the trees, and
Yep.
it makes the whole enterprise quite a bit harder. So yeah, and it's this exact same thing in Germanic, right?
Yeah.
So
Another very familiar problem. Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, so I have a student who's kind of working on. So there's some ideas about doing this kind of. People have tried to do these kind of phylogenetic analyses of Germanic that incorporate that try to build in the contact basically. Frederick Hartmann did some work in this respect, and I have a student who's trying to take some of that and maybe some other tools, including some kind of neat stuff drawn from mapping from GIS. I forgot what this actually
Uh-huh.
stands for. Global
Information science or
Information.
something. Yeah.
I should remember this, but I don't. Um, and he's trying to, yeah, basically take some of those sort of models of the type that Hartmann was working on for Germanic, and then these very more sophisticated maps of Anatolia informed by the actual geography and where we think the people might have been, and then kind of try to put these together with the linguistic data to get a more coherent picture of how the family might have sort of, yeah, affiliated.
That sounds cool.
I think it's pretty neat too. Yeah,
Yeah, good,
I'm
good
kind of
project.
stoked. So yeah. So I've been hoping to convince someone to deal with to work on the problem of Anatolian subgrouping, but I hadn't really thought of. Well, I mean, I didn't even really know of the existence of these GIS tools, for instance, and the agent-based models, or sorry, the Hartmann style models are new, and so like it's all I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty neat, and if it yields some insight, count me in.
Yeah, that sounds super.
Yeah.
And and so speaking of Anatolian and Germanic, we had thought about theming this discussion a little bit around a feature that is actually probably best attested in those two subgroups.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Yeah, I mean, Indo-Iranian is important too, but I agree that these are really Germanic and Anatolian provide really crucial evidence for these. for these heteroclite nouns that folks are interested in. Folks are beating down the doors to learn about heteroclites, or so I've heard.
Well, you know, uh that's my audience, right? People get curious about things, and I don't know if this is super well presented in most public facing material, partially because most of the people preparing that material don't understand the Anatolian stuff very well.
Mhm.
Another problem is everybody repeats the same factoids about the Germanic material that are in all the public domain handbooks, which sometimes have, again, semi-hallucinated data.
Is that real? Yikes. Okay. All right. We should be
Uh,
cautious.
yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the handbooks, like Gothic and Old Norse, for whatever reason, draw in a certain kind of person or historically have that's just very willing to say, like, oh, Laukasechlich, you should expect this thing to be there. And it's not, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, well, I would be more interested in knowing what the attested form is than in knowing
Mhm.
what you construct out of one attested form. And then, you make seven reconstructed forms that everybody cites as if they're actually there. Uh,
Mhm.
like that just, it bothers me when people do that.
Yeah.
It's because the
Yeah.
fact is the data is kind of messy,
Mhm.
but I'd like to know that it's messy, right? Like I don't,
Mhm.
you don't need to make me a pretty paradigm for this. Like I think that it's completely acceptable to say that you have alternate forms floating around and that actually speakers may not have one really, good paradigm in their head for this, right? There may be a certain amount of suppletion at the earliest stage that we know about in Germanic, and that's fine. Like if that's the case, that's the case.
Yeah, the German. I found that I've always found the Germanic data particularly difficult, and actually the North Germanic data is maybe the hardest part of it. It's just you find there's a lot of variants. Like the water word, for instance, has these R and N. So that's the gist of what we're getting at here, right? So these are
Yeah.
the so-called RN stems, which we reconstruct with both R's a final R basically, or a stem final R in some parts of the paradigm, and then an N, stem final N in other parts, and it seems like you have these R. I mean, you don't. I don't think you. I mean, nowhere in Germanic, as far as I know, anyway, do you actually have a single obvious synchronic paradigm that incorporates both R and N, but you have lots and lots of R full, forms that end in an R and lots of forms that end in N to clearly cognate lexemes. So like water, it's like there's, N's and R's kind of floating around all over, especially North Germanic. And I've always found that data very difficult to navigate. Yeah. I,
Gothic arguably might have an LN paradigm in Sun, maybe. Uh,
yeah. Yeah,
I'll,
true. Right. It's true. I've been talking about the R's only because the only there's only really like the one LN stem that we set up in Indo-European terms, right? The word for sun, just like you said. And we don't have it in Anatolian, so
yeah, right. Like that's,
yeah, like the
isn't that
one line.
awesome?
Yeah.
So can you like just to set the table a little bit more for
Yeah.
us, can you talk a little bit about what are heteroclitic nouns? What does one
Yeah.
of these paradigms look like in, say, Hittite? Because these are so much better preserved in Anatolian than anywhere else.
That's right. That's the main point that makes Anatolian super interesting, right? So, like, even before we got Hittite, I'll show you what these paradigms look like in 1 second. But basically, uh, even before we got Hittite, people suspected the existence of these. I mean, yeah, RN stems of these kind of alternations based on just the comparative data, right? You find again, like looking across Germanic, R's and N's at the end of stems, both in what look like the same lexeme. So there's kind of like enough in the Indo-European, in the nuclear European languages, to suspect this. And actually, Vedic is pretty good too. So you have at least one like true heteroclite paradigm in Vedic Sanskrit, like one that looks really good. Like the word for day is ahar, and then it has genitives. The genitive is achnas.
Hmm.
And so you can see an R and an N. I mean, they really form a synchronic paradigm. The word for blood is okay. It's a little weird. Has this funny nominative singular, maybe you remember, but it's asark, and then with this funny K that we don't understand, and then asnas. And so you see that same kind of yeah, R and alternation. But yeah, but this is, those are the exceptions rather than the rule. Even in languages like Vedic, mostly it looks like these things have been refashioned as end stems pretty typically.
And
And so,
and there's a
yeah.
little bit of material in archaic Latin, right? Like femur. and feminis, right?
Right. Yeah, true, true. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. None of them look the way that they're kind of supposed to in Latin, but they do you're right, there are right synchronic paradigms that have a little bit of R and N-ness to them. And then yeah, crazy paradigms like the word for blood, which is like I mean it's sort of the way it usually appears in dictionaries, something like yoker yokineris, which is like it has both the N and the R in the oblique case form. So it's quite bizarre. But yeah, Anatolian is really the place where you see these things best preserved. And so here I can show you give you a quick look at what these things look like. Is that how does that look for people? Is that
Looks good. You could maybe zoom in on it a touch more.
okay? Like that? Is that good?
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. Um, Yeah, so Hittite has this big class of like RN stems. They're kind of all over the place. This class always everything in it is neuter. And so we talk about these neuter RN stems. The same thing is true, of course, for the one LN heteroclite that we were just talking about. The word for sun. Um, and Yeah, and so this is a kind of a core class, a class of neuter nouns, and already in European, they, it's clear that they consist of some of the kind of the core lexemes in the language, like stuff that refers to kind of everyday concepts that so fire, water, blood, sun, it's the stuff that's kind of part of the everyday human experience, and so kind of part of this kind of common stock of everyday nouns. Yeah, but we call these things heteroclites, and heteroclites just a way of saying there are two kind of different stems within the same paradigm, and by this we mean there are some forms that end in an R at the end of the stem, and some that end in an N. And we don't have any phonological rule in any of the languages, or even that we can reconstruct for the proto-language that regularly relates R to N in any like systematic way. So it's not like you could take like I mean, some people try to do this at like a pre, Proto-European, trying to explain how these things came to be. The idea would be like take an N, maybe it becomes an R at the end of a word or something. But like we just
Mhm.
don't have that as a regular phenomenon in Indo-European terms.
I've
Uh,
heard I've heard people adduce, and I think that it's an interesting thing to adduce without knowing how it's related, third person plural forms with R's versus N's, right?
uh, Third person, like in verbs you're talking about?
Yeah, right, like in an imperfect in Latin, like an ere versus, an in Gothic Wesun or something like that. Uh,
Yeah, I think that a lot of so there were those were things that were part of the conversation until we sort of people didn't know what to make of these R endings in especially verbs in the middle, and of course there's an N in the third plural ending in both active and non-active categories in Indo-European terms, and there are. But yeah, people didn't know what to do with like the Latin endings, like I don't know, third person plural middle, like entor and things like this.
mhm.
Actually, this is another place where Hittite kind of clarified what you might have already suspected, but actually, it seems like R is kind of the equivalent of I so what it does in the middle, what active does in the what I does in the active at the end. It basically marks a present tense form.
So it's
And
the middle hic nunc particle.
that's right. Yeah, it's the middle Hittite part is R in Indo-European terms. Anatolian shows that pretty clearly. Tocharian shows it pretty clearly. Latin, it's it's a little harder to understand, but you see, we all know these, tor, third singular, and entor, and it seems like that's just a Hittite marker. So I think that these were part of the conversation until we kind of sorted out what was going on with those endings. So yeah, so you do see people trying to make claims about the R and N alternation and how it could have come about. I'm not going to go near those things, but I'm happy to flag the papers. There's a Reiner Lipp has worked a lot on this. He's really into these heteroclite paradigms. He's written a pretty recent paper on that, which folks could find,
Okay.
LIPP. And and so if you're interested in kind of theories of their prehistory, that will be one place to go. But I don't really have anything to say about the RN alternation other than to say it's there already in Proto-European, and I mean I just don't see it has to be morphological already at that stage. So basically, we need two stems that one that ends in R, that in basically the nominative and accusative forms of the paradigm. And then a stem that ends in N elsewhere in the oblique case forms. And Hittite is cool because like we not only have like a set of nouns that look like they're old and inherited and don't really aren't built out of like recognizable. I mean, they're not related to other words within Hittite, but we actually even have words that are just derived with productive derivational suffixes from attested bases that do this RN stem thing.
Hmm.
So this is really neat. But just to give you a sense of like yeah like just to start here with the non-derived types, you get things like well, the word for word, it also means something like matter or thing, even. Odar in Hittite. So you can see the nominative accusative singular, they're going to end in an R here and here. And then in all of the oblique case forms, you're going to get this N that appears at the end of the stem. And yeah, it goes throughout the paradigm. Quite interestingly, in the neuter nominative accusative plural, we actually start seeing these. They differ from the singular in having a kind of long vowel at the end of them, which is kind of neat.
Hmm.
And so there's some kind of a contrast between probably odar and badar, or like a kind of a stressed long vowel, in at least within some of these paradigms. Actually, this is something I've been super interested in for the past, I don't know, 5 years or so. I've written two different papers that kind of deal with the sort of prosodic patterns that you find in RN stems, which folks who are really, really interested can find on my website. But I think this is this is really an important feature that Hittite is preserving. And yeah, if we really want to get in the weeds, I think I can explain how it kind of helps us understand some of the funny forms that we get in Germanic, like the word for fire or something. But
Hmm.
maybe but let's stay closer to the data for now. There's also other types. So that word for sun that we were just talking about, that's a so-called, well, it's the L version of this, but a wool wen. And so we also have these complex RN stems that have not just an R and N, they have also like a W that comes before it basically. So we're win. And one of the realizations of this in Hittite is this sort of the Mehor paradigm, which you can see here. And so this you haven't well it here realized as an U, but goes back to an Indo-European W. But again, the main thing that's of interest is that NR alternation. Um, and then finally, yeah. So here under two are the ones that the Indo-Europeanists like the most. These are like our, every Indo-Europeanist spends an enormous chunk of their life talking about words like fire and water, especially, maybe to a lesser extent, blood and house. These sort of play a fundamental role in how we understand the prehistory of Indo-European morphophonology. They've just been always like right at the center of understanding. I mean, and maybe justly so, people have paid attention. Waters, of course, like maybe some of you guys have heard me talk about this before, but um, water is in it's part of the story of how we figured out that Hittite was an Indo-European language.
Hmm.
People looked, they saw water come up in these cuneiform texts and were like, it looks just like English water. I mean, here it is, here it is, well, just water. And so, it's you get a sentence like he eats bread and he drinks water, and people are like, oh, well, this has got to be Indo-European.
Yeah. It is pretty phenomenal to think that you could shout water, water 2,500 years ago in Anatolia and be understood.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So, just to I'll point out because of my funny interests. Again, you see what looks like this that same stressed long vowel in the plural form of water. So you have, I don't know why I can't highlight this right now, but I just here in the nominative accusative plural, we just see that same long vowel that we see in udar, and I think it's pretty interesting. So this looks like it goes back to an Indo-European, like a long O vowel. And actually, that's interestingly enough. So as much as the Germanic word looks like the nominative accusative singular of water, which now I can't. Oh God damn it.
So these plurals, are those old collectives?
Ooh. That is something that people like to say, that's for sure. And
What is your take on that?
I'm a what is this called? There was one of my colleagues used this word, and I'd like to use the same one. Heretic. I'm a heretic here.
Okay.
Yes, the traditional wisdom is yes that these are some kind of a collective, and so. And in part, what they're trying to understand is actually, it's kind of exactly what I'm talking about here. So hold on, I think I've now fixed this and can reshare. Genuinely not sure what happened there, but nope, that's the wrong thing. Sorry, Alwyn. Uh, that's something else I was looking at. Wow, I'm really showing off how my incredible training at teaching online. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. So back to the water. Yeah, so one of the reasons that people are trying to understand why they might think that these what I'm calling here just plurals of neuter nouns are collectives is because things that look like plurals in some ways, uh, so they look like the form of the Hittite water word that I'm showing here and saying in Hittite, this means waters. It means like, he drinks like seven, the ritual guy comes forth and he grabs these seven vessels and he drinks seven portions of water or something like, or pours them out for the deity or whatever. It really means waters in the same way as we can make that sort of how we can force this count plural onto a mass noun in English. Um, but anyway, all this is to say is that the word for water in English actually goes back to a word form that looks a little bit more like the Hittite
Mhm.
plural form here with a long O. So that's how you get to all the Germanic forms like English water. They all have something that looks like it has that O that we associate with nominative use of plural in Hittite. And so people have thought, well, how can this be if it meant waters already in Proto-European? Well, it must have, you know, there's no way it could have developed to just mean water in English. So they assume, well, maybe it means like a lot of water that forms a body together or something. And so that would be a way of thinking it as a kind of collective to a mass noun. And yeah, and there's kind of a whole theory, that bigger theory that goes against that sort of is that yeah, it goes in hand with this mode of analysis. I think it's completely wrong, but it's ex completely standard in our field and traditional. I have if folks really want to learn more about this, my paper from 2023, it's called something like Emergent Mobility in Indo-European RN stems. It talks about this in some detail and argues against the sort of the standard wisdom. But this phenomenon I think is super interesting. I mean, there is something that we do need to capture about how these what I'm calling plural forms can go on to become singular in the languages because we actually see that again and again and again. Actually, every word we've talked about so far works that way, basically. The word for sun, most of the reflexes of it in the Indo-European languages go back to things that have a long O, but they just mean singular sun in this way. And the word for fire in Germanic works this way too. I don't, yeah, I think you're gonna maybe show us some of the Germanic
Yeah.
forms eventually. Yeah, but so maybe we could talk more about that when we get to it. But same deal. So it goes back to these long O forms. And so again, this is the traditional solution for bridging that sort of semantic gap between things that are again, in Hittite are definitely plurals, but in the other Indo-European languages often become singulars.
Yeah, but it's not the hardest semantic development in the world to go from some element in the plural to the singular, right? I mean, when I'm talking about water, what unit am I talking about, right?
Yeah,
When I'm talking about fire, what is the unit of fire? It's, you know,
I agree. It's right. This is what happens with mass nouns. Like mass nouns are the plural of the mass noun is like interpreted differently in
mm,
um, my personal view is not that the collective interpret whatever we want to call these. I don't like the term collective, but these sort of set interpretations are I don't th I think they were there in Proto-Indo-European. I just think actually again this is my true heterodoxy. It's like I actually just think that the word something like that what underlies Hittite widar here could mean both. It just could mean
mm.
something like waters set, a whole bunch of them, individually in a normal count noun reading, and also another reading, something like a thing that's made up of a body of water that is comprised of a lot of water, basically. I think both of those meanings were available, and we see them sort of differently reflected across the languages. But yeah, that's weedsy. I mean, I don't want I could talk forever about this. It's too Yeah, but I think actually this is actually the core of it. Like having seen these, we'll be in a good position to look at the Germanic material. Fire and water are the most important examples that we see across the languages. I'm sure it's not an accident that they have this kind of dualistic opposition, right, where they
Mhm.
both show R and stem inflection. And then I just want to just mention, just because I think they're fun, that in Hittite, yeah, we have these RN stem um, RN stems that can be used to derive things. So we have this suffix adar, which alternates with it basically is a way of making nouns like in English ing. So you can take a verb like to drink, and you can make aquadar drinking, or a verb up to take. You can make apadar taking. You can do this from nouns, sorry, from adjectives like good. You know, you can make asu good, asuadar goodness, and from even from nouns. Things like the word for man in Hittite is a human is antuksa, and you can make antuksada humanity. And so, like Hittite really likes these RN stems. They're not just the Indo-European rubbish that has survived through the centuries, into Hittite.
Mhm.
They really like they make these and use them all the time. And so I think that they're super interesting in this way. Yeah.
Simon said, I've seen that blood word compared to a Latin gloss for blood and festus, assir.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, this is the standard. Yes, that is the correct. That is an old Latin form that is definitely related to it for sure. Yeah,
And
yeah.
Cameron asked if you maybe have a concise answer about how many genders, noun classes did Hittite have?
Genders, it has two. It just has two genders. It has something that we call common gender traditionally in Hittite studies, but it's just animate from a linguistic perspective, and then it has neuters. And so the three-way split that we see in the nuclear Indo-European language is Latin, like those two genders that I've just named with the same with we call them so in what we call masculine and neuter in Latin is just in Hittite common and also neuter, and then at Latin of course adds that third gender like Greek does and other nuclear Indo-European languages. Actually, I think we maybe talked about this, Jackson, in the past, how really the feminine is kind of the most important innovation of the that sort of separates that tells us that Anatolian kind of split off from the family first, and then all the other languages kind of went off together.
I think we might have talked about that in a video. Uh, I don't know. We've made a few of these videos over the years.
Yeah. I think we did because it's like kind of the one that well I don't know. I mean I certainly at some point did like a hey what's special about Anatolian like
Yeah.
what's
I
special
think
about it? It went off first,
I think that was
and
7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
yeah
We did, but
yeah
we did.
yeah.
Uh, so Simon says, would the ending of the stem for sanguine then reflect the in variant of the same noun?
Yes, that's the stand. Yeah, that's kind of the typical view. Although I find the reflexes of sanguine extremely hard to reconcile with the other nuclear evidence. You got to have to do some very fancy footwork to kind of make it work. But yes, it's that's the same root. Yeah.
And just to repeat something you said earlier, because I think that it's a really salient, interesting point, these RN stems in Hittite are neuter.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitionally always neuter.
Mhm.
Do we think that's the case then in Macro Proto-Indo-European?
I mean, mostly they stay neutered, like in Indo-Iranian, the ones that look the ones that have retained their paradigms intact are always neuter. The ones that don't are still mostly neuter. You occasionally get so like the sun is a good example of one where actually it becomes animate in some of the languages. It looks these will mostly look like internal developments. I think, isn't it? Remind me, maybe you remember how the Germanic works. Is it sometimes neuter and sometimes masculine across Germanic?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
Or
like
sometimes mass, yeah, right. It's like
with
yeah, okay.
within one book of the Gothic Bible, it can be feminine and masculine or neuter, hard to say.
Yeah.
In Old Norse, it's always feminine.
Hmm.
Uh, Old English, the informs are feminine. They're feminine in German, but then there's also an L form you occasionally see in Old English, but it never occurs in such a way that you can tell what gender it is. So
Hmm.
yeah, so
Yeah,
it's all mixed up.
I think that one of the main reasons for this is basically the thing we were just talking about before, which is again, a lot of these things that are the singular of these neuter stems go in the nuclear European languages go back to things that look like what everybody calls a collective. These things with a long O, like ol in for the sun or for the word for yeah for all of these RN stems, and and this looks just like the nominative singular of animate nouns, like it because of for the weak people really here Semiramis law is what this is called, but it basically is the thing that takes an S of the that we sort of normally think of as the nominative singular marker and lengthens the final vowel of sonorant final stems, things that end in R and L and stuff in animate nouns, which have that S marker. So anyway, basically you have things like let me think of a good example of one that ends in an or. So like
Well, there's the family words, your father words, and
yeah, I would yeah, like I don't know, the ancestor of like doctor or something
yeah.
like that, right? That's a good so any of these tor stems, like they have nominative singulars and or that looks just like these yeah, but also like
Mhm.
similar in the kinship terms with except with E, yeah, er. So I guess the generalization would be like you have a long vowel followed by an R at the end, that looks like the nominative singular of an animate noun. Yeah. And so yeah, father would then fit too in that pattern. So yeah, so cool. So yeah, so anyway, so that's why I think they end up I mean, I think this is what most people believe. This is why they end up getting sometimes reinterpreted as animates. Um
Well, and not to mention, there's probably a certain amount of conscious reanalysis of this, right? Because if you have stories about the sun
mhm.
personified, you're fairly likely to turn that into a masculine or a feminine, depending on the story.
Yeah, there's a tradition in Indo-European of thinking that these were, I mean, that right, that I think is completely right. Sometimes we think Indo-Europeanists think that for some of these words you can reconstruct like an animate and a neuter version, and they kind of like work this way. Like they're like, oh, one would have been like the personified. So fire is the most famous example of this. There's the, so we're looking here still. Sorry, maybe I'll take this down after I say this, but here in pakor, this would be the neuter version, and then this is the source of is going to be aligned with English fire, but say Latin or something like this, it has the word for fire is ignis.
Mhm.
And that is probably is certainly cognate with the Vedic word for the fire god Agni, and so that was supposedly that's the animate fire word, the one that is the personified fire, the deity fire, and then Pakar was just like the
I made a
I
fire.
don't know,
Yeah.
just the fire, just a fire,
Yeah.
just an actual fire, I guess. Yeah.
And then I guess the other example people adduce there is the aqua or Gothic ahwa word as
Yes.
animate versus the water word being the inanimate. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the one people like the fire word only just because it really in the Indic tradition, it's so robustly like the god and the fire are the same, and they
Yeah.
play on that all the time in the Vedic poems about like, you know, I worship Agni, but like you're literally like, you know, I offer this to Agni and you're like literally reaching in and making an offering to the fire. So
Mm.
I don't know. You remember you must have you must remember Jared talking about this with such joy and delight about this about the oneness of these things. I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he talks with joy and delight about, obscure Greek and Armenian cognates. So
Hmm.
he'll literally put on a bow tie and get on a stage and like sing to you about it. So
Yep. I love it. I love that for him. Yeah. What a man.
Oliver says, why did the productive abstract show a short vowel in the nominative?
Let's pop it back up. I thought it was so weird. Let me a short vowel in the nominative singular like here at the
Like,
end.
yeah, I
Like
guess that's what
yeah,
I guess is the question.
so in Hittite, yeah, all of these go back to so the original inflection of these things that we think is that the nominative accusative singular would have been in just syllabic R. Like and so syllabic R is just going to show up as just a short R in Hittite. And yeah, so that's the reason basically. And these in the classes like yeah, udar up here something, then the thing that goes back to syllabic R, unstressed syllabic R is just going to show up as R, and that'll contrast with the ones down here where it's going to go back to that or that we've been sort of fixating on
Hmm.
as a source of lots of singular forms in nuclear Indo-European.
This seems like a good point since we've gone for about an hour. Maybe do an intermission for about 5 minutes and then come back and drill down on the Germanic data. What do you think?
Sure, that sounds good to me. Yeah, I'll get another cup of coffee.
Yeah. Okay, let's just I'll stop recording and just come back at the hour.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, see you in a
Okay.
minute.
You know, it is so good of you, the amount of time you take on doing these with us.
No problem. It's fun. What better way is there to spend a Sunday morning?
Well, I mean, it is fun. I just like I am very appreciative of the time.
No, no, it's no. This is one of the joys of my week, and I feel very, like I said, I just finished teaching, and I feel like a little bit like for the first time, I don't feel, and for the first time in some time, I don't feel like overwhelmed, just like
Yeah.
overwhelmed with stuff. I mean, there's still lots of stuff to take care of. I'm, as you know, the abstracts for WCAG are due tomorrow. For these are annual
Yeah, as I do
UCLA
know.
fall. Yeah, I know. Me too. Me too. I have to write mine as well. I want to give a paper just because one of our featured speakers is Paul Kaparsky next year. And he and I work, I don't know, in some ways he's one of the big inspirations for a lot of my research. And so I want to, give a nice paper that kind of that shows my appreciation for that. We also have someone else very good too. I think some of your students, some of your listeners would be interested with this guy, Riccardo Ginevra from well, he's an Italian scholar. Trying to remember what university he's at right now. Yeah, it's at one of these universities in Milan, basically, and he's very good, and he talks a lot about comparative Indo-European mythology,
Hmm.
and he does one thing that I think is really cool and about his scholarship is, like many other well-trained Italian classicists, ultimately they really, really know Latin and Greek, and but he also goes further and uses a lot of data from Germanic, a lot of interesting comparisons of Germanic and especially Indic material, actually.
Hmm.
So I don't know, I think his work is pretty cool and innovative. So yeah, kind of think it's going to be a really good fall conference.
Sounds like a cool
Especially if you're
person.
coming. Especially if you're coming, that would be, yeah.
Well, especially right.
The
No,
folks, the folks here are, so I should say, maybe just to plug it, our conference is every, it's like the second to last weekend in October. You can find more information on the UCLA Program of Indo-European Studies website, but second to last weekend of October, free to the public. Everyone is welcome to participate in the conference itself and the festivities that surround it. So it's a nice event, and it's also available online for those of you who are like maybe in Europe or something along those lines.
and there always is pretty good public attendance, right? I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah.
so.
We have one
Well,
guy who's been going now to who's coming up on almost like his third. It's like we're coming on I think we're WECIAC 38 or something. It's 37 or anyway, he's been to all of them except for one. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, just a local interested guy. Yeah.
well, should we talk about Germanic? And this is going to be kind of a mess.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I will learn something.
Doubtful. But I have gone back to the sources, the actual texts. What I'm going to talk to you about is what we see there and not just the same stuff the handbooks say. So we have pretty strong evidence that three of these heteroclitic nouns survived in Proto-Germanic, not because in any Germanic language we actually see that heteroclitic paradigm for sure, but because we see the dismembered parts of that paradigm in Germanic. We see reflexes with L and N of the sun word. We see reflexes with both R and N of the fire word and of the water word. And interestingly, more than I think people often acknowledge, you do see reflexes of both sometimes in one language, just not necessarily as members of one paradigm. So
Hmm.
in Old Norse, we have reflexes of the L and the N in sun and of the R and the N in fire and water. It's just that one is the dominant word and one is a poetic alternative usually. But
Hmm.
they remember both. They just don't necessarily think of it as one paradigm. They think of it as like another word for the same thing, apparently.
Hmm.
And we do have reflexes of the L and the N for sun in Gothic and Old English too, at least in Old English and West Germanic. There may be other West Germanic languages that I haven't pieced apart as much. I'm trying to remember how did you put it once? Didn't you say that West Germanic was for the casuals and the real Germanicists are into North and East Germanic? I'm
I
not.
think that just the Indo-European, I mean, yeah, the Indo-Europeanists are biased towards, things like, Gothic. It's got little bits of archaic nonsense like the passive and the dual and so, so they spend all their time worrying and fussing about those ones.
Oh, I do worry and fuss about Gothic too, but obviously Old Norse is going to always be the center of my heart.
It's also harder. I mean, I feel like, I don't
Thank
know.
you.
I have a close colleague who, has very good German, and he's like, your German's really good. Just a little bit of about how old European languages work. Reading Gothic is just incredibly easy compared to, Old Norse, which really has a lot of challenges.
Thank you. I like thinking that I'm doing something especially hard. Actually, I think Gothic is pretty hard. Like, if you really get into the nitty-gritty about Gothic, like there's a lot about Gothic that's not easy. But
Hmm.
anyway, if we look at the sun word in Biblical Gothic, it's pretty interesting what we see. So we get both an N and an L form. We see, for example, in Luke, the sun sank, suno. We see the same thing, may the sun not sink on your anger in Ephesians. And we see until the sun may rise, suno in Nehemiah. But in Mark, and only in Mark, we also see this L nominative form. The sun sank, the sun is darkened.
Hmm.
So that's pretty interesting, right? It's obviously a long debated and much debatable proposition just how many people were involved in translating the Bible into Gothic, but it certainly looks like more than one person was, and it looks like the writer of Mark has this nominative L that perhaps the translator of some of these other books doesn't have.
Hmm.
But in Mark, the dative of son has the inform. So this is the exact same book where it's soul in the nominative, but it's sunin in the dative singular. Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's been ignored a little bit because the way that I typically see this presented is, oh, there's L forms and there's N forms, but actually it's possible maybe that the writer of Mark has a heteroclitic paradigm there.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. That's kind of like, right. So I guess the normal analysis would be to say, oh, well, he's using the L form over here from this, from one lexeme, and then, oh, these ones are related to the other Sun words that have an N in them. But that doesn't seem, I mean, right, if it's the same author and it's, yeah, no, I agree that looks more like a proper heteroclite.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that is the only book where we have multiple case forms of sun, right? So
Should
we
have talked about the sun more.
they really that the Bible should talk about the sun more. This is a problem I'm going to go back and talk to the church fathers about. But the problem is in these other books, you get, you get a nominative or you get an accusative,
Hmm.
and that's it. You don't get any other case forms. Only Mark has a diversity of forms of sun. So if that's a heteroclitic paradigm, it seems to only be that we can claim that it is for that writer. By the way, for what it's worth, and maybe it isn't worth much, the Greek word that's translating is helios in all of those cases.
Hmm.
Um, I think that it's kind of interesting that in Matthew, son right here in the accusative singular is feminine on the evidence of the possessive pronominal adjective that's attached to it. But
Hmm.
the dative in Mark is used with a masculine or neuter participle. So speakers also aren't agreeing about what gender it is. That's kind of interesting too.
Yeah. That is cool.
right? So like I said, it's messy.
Yeah.
Um, I think you can make a case that the writer of Mark has a heteroclitic paradigm, but you cannot make the case beyond that really, because clearly someone, like I would love to know what the writer of Matthew thinks the nominative of son is,
Mhm.
right? Um, I bet it's this, but I don't know that because he doesn't use the nominative. I would also
Yeah.
like to know what the writer of Luke thinks the accusative or dative of son is. Um, and since this isn't used with any adjectives or participles or anything like that, I also can't tell you what the gender of son is for these writers. So it's kind of messy, but
It could be.
potentially, what
I
were
was
you
just going to say it could be worse. It could be Hittite, and we don't just, they write this word for sun all the time. We just have no idea what it is.
right?
It's, lives under a logogram. The Hittite king calls himself, he calls himself, the sun god. Basically, it's the as a title. It's like His Majesty. But we don't, they always write it lithographically. Yeah, the other thing is the other ways. Yeah, like when I was looking at these Gothic examples, it's like, oh, when you say the sun rises or sets or something, the Hittite, we have lots of examples of, oh, the sun rises, and the way they say this is just that, when it dawns, basically, or when when it gets light, and so like we don't have the sun, we would love to have the sun word.
That it's kind of hilarious that it's like constantly evading you, and
Yeah.
there's no alliteration or rhyme or anything that would kind of like give you a hint about
Nah,
what word is under
nah,
there.
no idea. We don't do
That
that. I mean,
sucks.
we could guess. I mean, look, yeah. I mean, it's possible that probably what lives under the logographic things is just the old day word,
Hmm.
and so yeah, based on the other comparative Anatolian material, that's what you would guess. But yeah, and we at any rate we don't look like we don't have the inherited word for sun in those contexts, and then all of the places where you're like, oh, it's just not the sun god. There's no equation. It's just the day's beginning. And no, then you get this other expression that describes it. So
That's pretty fun. That's also kind of like how we don't know the numbers, a lot of
yeah,
the number words in Hittite, right? Because they use logograms for them.
just really three. We have three, and I mean we have a couple others, but not. Yeah, they look terrible.
Yeah, so for people that aren't as familiar with that material, it's like, they use the number one, the number
Yeah,
two effectively. It's like if we always did that and never wrote one, two.
exactly. You would never know. You would never know. It's this is English. English does have some logograms, and here the numbers are ones are examples of them.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail your son thing. This is I
that's
agree with you. This looks compelling. I just wish there would be nice if there were just a little more as usual.
yep. Yeah, so like I said, it's not as clean as people want to make it, and part of the problem is just like the only book with more than one case is Mark. Now in Old Norse too, with son, it's a feminine. It's always feminine. We have case agreements and gender agreements with adjectives and things like that. It's feminine in every source. So definitely not neuter anymore, in spite of it looking maybe neuter in Gothic. Um, Early text, we see this paradigm. It's a pretty typical long O stem feminine. So it's definitely been assimilated into just like, okay, this is a normal feminine noun, and the root is soul. Supposedly, there's this manuscript, Codex Idensis Latin Quarto 83. I have never seen it. Everybody cites this without ever showing a picture of it or a good transcription of it. So I have some mild skepticism about it because all the spellings I see from it look a little too informed. They look a little bit too much like somebody correcting it who knows Old Norse.
Hmm.
But if true, this manuscript has the nominative, hypothetically, it's just a list of names, as Solu. Um, all that does is say that, yes, at this early stage in the 900s or so, when somebody's hearing them say this word, it is a normal feminine because those feminines would have had that U in the nominative singular a long time ago.
Hmm.
So doesn't say much, but I think that it is worth saying, all right, definitely in the Viking Age, this is already a normal feminine noun. But we do occasionally see sun, the old oblique form of the root. Mostly we see it in kennings where it will be the genitive singular. So sunu, this would be the genitive singular of a typical in-stem feminine in Old Norse. So the nominative you would make from that is suna. But for example, you're saying like Sunu Hyolm, the helmet of the sun, that's the sky. Uh, this is just kinning talk, basically. And probably the earliest attestation of these end forms in Old Norse is in the poem Alvismal in the Poetic Edda, where we get just lists of poetic synonyms, Haiti. And
Mm,
we're told that soul, normal word, that is called suna, nominative singular, feminine, weak instem, among the gods.
mm,
So that's somebody who's looking at this as just another, as a poetic synonym, not connecting it to the paradigm of soul. You could maybe, I don't think you could make a very good argument about this, but just to get ahead of it, I think you could maybe try to make an argument that since we're mostly seeing it in the genitive and kennings like this, that there could be speakers who have a heteroclitic paradigm. But I think that since you're seeing so many early sources that have that solar as the genitive singular, right? That's in
yeah.
Hall, for example. I don't think this is heteroclitic for anybody. I think that just somehow they've split it off, maybe because there were enough kennings early on that used the Sunu form, they've split it off into a totally different word. They don't think of it as the same thing.
Mm,
It's not like the writer of Mark, where I think he might actually have both in one paradigm. This is now a poetic synonym. Also, however, worth pointing out, in the days of the week, it is Sunu Dagger. Now,
mm,
there's a pretty good argument that those days of the week are borrowed into Old Norse from a West Germanic language, but arguably you could say that's the earliest attestation of the Sun form in Old Norse too, given that it must have been borrowed if it is borrowed from West Germanic really, really early. But then there's fire. So this is kind of neat because in Gothic, this has become this is a weird instem. It's a weird weak noun,
mm,
right? Because we don't have that vowel ending. This looks like it should be a strong noun, right? Phone. But then our actual endings, funens and the genitive, funen and the dative, these are our typical weak instem forms. So it is weird. Uh,
yeah.
and it's got that long O, like, I mean, actually, as you would expect. In Old Norse, we see a pretty common, well, I should point out for those who aren't as interested in Old Norse, uh, the old fire word is no longer the typical word for fire in Old Norse. The typical prose word for fire is elder, which also gives us in present day Scandinavian language the typical word for fire, eld in Swedish, for example. But in poetry, we pretty often see a masculine instem funi, short u, and the short u is confirmed by scansion. And occasionally, not so much as the form funi with an n, occasionally we see R forms too, and those have a long U. So, for example, Eikenfur, the stoked up fire in
Mm,
Force Nearness, where it's masculine, Althor Fura, can't really say, and Volundarkvida, here it is showing up in a kinning about basically standing for sword, so can't quite say what gender it is there. But this is masculine and this is masculine, unlike the neuter in Gothic. But it does mean that both that in form and that R form are there. But again, they're not part of one paradigm because that's genitive plural, um, that's accusative singular. This we see pretty abundantly in poetry in every case.
mm.
Hávamál has a line, Funi quicus av funa, fire is kindled by fire. So you
Mm.
got nominative and dative there. So it's
That's
not
beautiful.
surviving as a heteroclitic paradigm. Interestingly, that fire word, even though this isn't the typical word for fire, it does survive in some idiomatic places in present day Scandinavian. So, for example, in Swedish, ta fyr, catch fire, which is kind of cool. So it is really, really, really uh, residually there, even though it's not the typical word for fire anymore. But then water is the really cool one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So such a diversity of reflexes, if I remember rightly.
Oh, yeah. So West Germanic is just R, right? English water, German Wasser. In Gothic, it becomes a typical neuter weak noun, watto, and then wattens, watten. In Old Norse, it becomes a astem neuter, so vatten. But there are two places in poetry where it's vater. And this took me forever to track down because everybody cites Norrain saying, oh, yeah, Vater occurs sometimes, and no one goes and shows you where it is. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a classic move. It's a classic. Like, yeah, no, it's there somewhere.
yeah, so I'd always been too frustrated by this, and I had never gone to look for it. I'm like, I've got to find it for this talk. So I
Yeah.
found it. So it's two poems, and we have, in both cases, we have multiple manuscripts that attest to the spelling with R, so it doesn't look like a mistake or just someone didn't finish writing an end. And in fact, the really strong one is this one, where it's in skothending. So in skaldic poetry, you want that second to last syllable to be a lift that ends in the same consonants as another lift in the same line. So this is actually confirmed by the skothending, by the consonant rhyme there, vater and vitri. So
Mhm.
the wise, brave brother of Harold plunged my child under the water, und vater. Uh, Typical would be und vatten. So it is there. Um, and for early speakers, apparently not part of a heteroclitic paradigm with vatten, uh,
Mhm.
because this is dative. So you would expect Vatny if that were part of a heteroclitic paradigm, but it's there. It's pretty cool. I have occasionally heard the genitive of Vatten, uh, which is Vats, cited as ed evidence for a heteroclitic paradigm. Basically, the notion that somebody took Vater, started thinking of the R as a case ending, and then created a genitive Vats to it. I don't think you can really make that case though, because they so often drop the second in a series of three consonants that I don't think this is a good argument for there being a heteroclitic water word in Old Norse. I think this is just a normal result of Vatns being simplified to Vats. Uh, Still, Old Norse, uniquely, of course, it has a pretty large corpus, actually shows both reflexes for all three of these, even if not in one paradigm.
That's very cool. I never thought about that before. Yeah.
And, I suspect that probably poetry is part of what's keeping these alive because these poets are, greedy for poetic synonyms, right? And that's probably part of what's keeping these in their portfolio, even though they don't remember that they're, originally the same as their normal word. There is, by the way, an L reflex in Old English. There's one place where the sun rises in its soul. So that is still very, very residually there. Um, in the Old English rune poem and in other places where the names of the runes are given in Old English, the word for the S rune, which is reconstructed as having the name sun, um, it is called soul in Old Norse, is sigel.
Huh.
So what is the G doing there? Is that a W that's being
Looks like a laryngeal reflex to me.
there
I
we
don't know
go.
what you're talking about. It's
But
joke.
it's
Just a joke.
a but it's a legitimate question. What is the G? Is that actually
Yeah.
the Sun word? It could be something else. Um, Also, I think I'm gonna say German Funke, spark. While difficult to account for what that K is doing, that could be a reflex of this in form, even though, of course, German otherwise has the R form Feuer. Could be. Um, Not going to die on that hill, but that could be evidence of both forms of that stem existing in proto
Hmm.
proto High German. I don't know. I think you can make other cases for Funke, but it's a little bit of a difficult word to account for, no matter what you do. But maybe.
I didn't, I mean, like I said, I was aware of the diversity of the Germanic reflexes, but I didn't know it was this rich. So this is really nice, actually. I really think, I have to say, I've spent so much time thinking about these heteroclites. Like they are
Mm.
really interesting for the reconstruction of Indo-European prosody and these problems I've been working on for years. Um, so yeah, no, it's nice to know that it's one thing that's very reassuring is like I always like found the Germanic evidence like this stuff that you're talking about, these water forms buried. buried, just these two kind of hanging around water forms with the R in Old Norse. Like I was like I refused. I'm not sure. Like you wonder how much faith you should put in when you just find these in some handbook,
Yeah.
basically.
No,
And so,
I
yeah.
was skeptical myself because all I saw was people citing Noreen, and I'm like, give me a break, because Noreen does occasionally make stuff up, uh, or really stretch a point. But when I found out that there's multiple manuscript attestations for both of those, I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty good. But nobody ever cites the manuscripts; they just cite Noreen.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm guilty of this too. It's like people when you're working outside, especially when you're working outside of like your sort of I don't know, your sandbox. Like,
Yeah,
you
because
know.
what am I going to do if somebody says this form exists in Hittite, right? Like
Mhm.
I know enough to understand the secondary literature. I don't know
Mhm.
enough to pick up a cuneiform tablet and say, no, I disagree with this reading. You know what I
Well,
mean?
maybe the next time we talk, I'll come here and I'll talk a little bit more about this. I mean, nowadays now just as of the last couple of years, we have like a nice website where you can go and basically look up virtually every Hittite text, not every single one, but pretty darn close
That
in
would be
transliteration.
that'd be a great topic.
Yeah, I will. I would love to do it, but right, actually, this is a somewhat disastrous for me. But at the moment, the website has been down for about a week, and so
Oh,
it's impacting my research. I don't know what to do about it. So,
I've
but
I've had
yeah,
those problems.
uh,
By the way, on Germanic, occasionally you will see um, liver adduced as a possible heteroclitic, but I
mhm,
disagree with this on two grounds. One is that you only see R forms. There are no
mhm.
N forms, so what are we doing? There's no actual attestation of an N form.
Yeah,
And second, I don't know that these attempts to connect liver with Yekur, like I don't know, man. Like, where is this L coming from? What does this express an L about? Like, or you've got to argue that this L drops everywhere else. Like, it's so sporadic that I don't think you could I just don't think you can make that case really.
yeah. I was aware of that problem and have never put any faith in those forms. But yeah, it would be. People are always trying to find these things and gotta look somewhere. Yeah, we just found the liverwort and it's well, David Phil found it in Louvian. So we've now got our liverwort
Oh,
turning
cool.
out more or less the way it's supposed to. I think we only have the oblique stems attested, but they're yeah, ikun. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it's pretty
That's solid.
cool. Yeah. Someone's asking about the Hittite source books. Yeah, there's a website. There's kind of just I'll do the quick version of it today, which is just simply to say there's a website called the Hetetologie Portal Minds, HPM, auf English, and it's kind of the one-stop shop for everything. There's a thing on there, a transliteration project basically called the TLH dig, the Thesaurus Linguarum Digitalis is what it stands for. But um, yeah, you could access basically almost all Hittite cuneiform texts there in transliteration. It takes some doing to sort of figure out how to use, but maybe I'll run through that at some point when the website is working, which I should say it is not working right now. It's
That would
been
be
down.
great. And
Yeah.
it would benefit me too, because of course, I want to look this stuff up and not always just bother you or text you like, hey,
No,
is
it's
it
super.
not
It's
work?
yeah. This website is like this is everything. I mean, it's really changing. It's going to change the way that we do research in our field.
Great.
Just because I don't know. I mean, it's in some ways caused enormous headaches for me, and like as I've been working on this book on Hittite prosody, it has both enabled me to be way more empirical than I would have been otherwise. Now I can tell you exactly how many times such word occurs and when it's spelled plane and not, and these things are matter for me. But it means that I have to do to do the work of really making sure I've collected everything,
Yeah.
and that takes a lot of time. So it's I mean I'm super happy to have it, but it is it's been interesting because the dissertation upon which the book builds and really revises, and it's all it's a huge change, but that's like a difference between them. Like that, this was not available when I wrote my dissertation, and so I did it in one way, basically relying on the lexica.
Mm.
And now you can search things and pull up, bring to bear just a lot more empirical evidence in a way that was not possible before.
There's a lot of great projects like this. Old Norse is similarly being changed by the ongoing Dictionary of Old Norse Prose at the University of Copenhagen.
Yeah,
Uh,
I only learned of that like maybe from you actually, but anyway, just but in the last year or something, and it's amazing. That's an amazing
Super.
project.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's really super, and it's not done yet. Once it's actually done, it's
Mhm.
gonna just blow everything else out of the water. Stefan was asking, I was looking to see whether Eshar has some Germanic cognates, and from Wiktionary, it looks like it could be Old Norse Isarn. So Isarn is iron, and as far as I've ever been aware, that's a Celtic borrowing. Whether the Celtic word for iron might have something to do with blood, well,
You
um,
could conceive of it would be like the color
good.
connection. Yeah, right. I have a
Wic
colleague right now. It's kind of like how we get the red and oak thing.
Yeah, Wiktionary suggests that Celtic word is from the blood word, which is cool. So that is a reflex, but then that doesn't get you a heteroclitic, right? Um,
Yeah.
but still
Yeah,
cool.
I was not aware of proposals to make this a heteroclite before. I would have to look and think about it. But uh, yeah, I don't know.
These, yeah, quite a bit here. Interesting. Looks like there's some R forms, some N forms out there. Huh. Oliver also asked, the Anatolian languages do compounds, don't they? How do heteroclitics show up as first parts of compounds?
This is yeah, they show up with so I think we only have one as far as I understand. It only does have compounds. It has a few, not many, but it has a few. And the only one that comes to mind right now with the heteroclite stemmen is the word. This is so just this is a great story. I'm so glad this question came up. My daughter only knows one word of Hittite. She knows one word, and it's skarais, which is the Hittite word for asshole. It's literally the first piece of it is shit, sakar or sakan. We have this attested, and the second piece of it is mouth. So it's your shit
Jeez.
mouth, the mouth from the mouth from which the shit comes out. And this is the only word of Hittite she knows at the moment. But she loves to go around Scott eyes, which I think is quite funny. Yeah, it's a little weird that we get so the word by in isolation, the first member is sakar. Weirdly, we get this tsa showing up at the when it shows up in this compound form. Maybe this has something to do with it being a kind of reduced form of sakar in a compound or something along these lines. But yeah, that's a little bit of an unsolved problem, but it's definitely that element. And I suppose the interesting thing from a morphological perspective would be say, well, it looks like it's the R form that kind of is going in to the input, which is mostly not how we would think of RNs or really any, I mean, mostly people think of when you put, a form into further derivation, you get the so-called, weak stem
Hmm.
as the base. I think that's actually always been an simplification in other places in Indo-European, but we don't need to get into that here. It's a yeah, but anyway, R, and that's as far as I can remember off the top of my head, the only example. Yeah.
That's interesting because in Old Norse, all the compounds with sun are sol. You don't see those soon compounds except Sunday, sooner dagger, which again may be borrowed from West Germanic. It's
Hmm.
always like solar ganger, right? The course of the sun.
Right. But they
And
mostly settle on the L form anyway, as you were right, like as the
yeah, but I just mean that if you might think since both of these variants were floating around that you would occasionally see another compound with Sunu, and
yeah.
and you don't. So
Yeah, that
that's
is interesting. Yeah. I think that yeah, that maybe this is actually could be useful. But yeah, I guess my feeling is, especially in neuter nouns, actually are the places where you see the so-called like the stem that we see in the nominative accusative kind of going into the further derivation. Actually, there are a number of cases that look like this. Not again, I don't want to go too far down this road, but basically, things like Latin Venustrus related to Venus, so that's a neuter S stem in us, and And when you, it should have oblique forces in er, like venus veneris, but you then get these venustos forms. So when you stick this to suffix onto it, you're really sticking it onto the nominative accusative, what looks like the nominative accusative singular.
Huh. Yeah, and
So yeah, so this is a little actually that yeah that's a nice example. I think that's maybe the best example in all of Indo. Well, this combination neuter s stem plus toe that shows that the strong stem, so-called the nominative accusative stem, can be an input to derivation. So
mhm.
so thank you. This is a nice question, and I learned something. I did not had not thought about these Germanic compounds of RN stems. Yeah, I can't think of any RN stem compounds off the top of my head in Vedic, but there probably are some. I mean, just feel or yeah, or Greek for that matter, but Greek is not as good with heteroclites.
Yeah, the Greek data is a little weird because you occasionally seem to have the N replaced by a T, right? Like where the
Yeah, right. And so in some ways these could go back to ends. I mean, that's the,
yeah.
Greek is, hudor, hudatos, and that could be hudintos from a kind of anachronistic reconstruction there. And so, yeah, I guess they got eliminated by the phonology. But yeah, but Greek is, all of the end stems especially are getting remodeled extensively in part for this reason. And so, yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
And
so the Greek definitely has basically traces of all the RN stems that we've been talking about. It has AR for blood that we were just discussing a second ago. It has, uh,
Pier for fire and Helios
yeah,
for
yeah,
sun and
exactly, yeah, and yeah, Helios, and yeah, in some ways Greek is like the best at showing the full range of them, but like none of them in their sort of pristine form that we might hope to put them in. Yeah, Greek, by the way, por is or yeah, or pier, as depending on your preferred pronunciation of this thing, uh, is another example where the cognate set, it looks exactly like the Germanic form going in. Like it looks like it has an O, yeah, it looks like it's based on an oblique stem, like a zero grade of the type that we see in the Porter in the Germanic evidence. So yeah, so I just think there's it doesn't go back to the O directly, but it goes back to like a weak form of that stem in the same way. So yeah, it's nice to see. This is another place where kind of Germanic and Greek kind of line up.
mm,
In yeah. Anyway, that's a bit obscure. I'm now getting into my own interests, I think, a
fire.
bit too.
Yeah, and then of course is Hodor and water,
Mhm.
which line up perfectly as far as I can tell. Basically.
Yeah, except for the vocalism of the root, right? So they both look like they have the long O and the or and stuff, but obviously the Germanic forms are based on a woe, and the Greek form is based on ud, I guess. But in other ways, they
So
look the same.
O stem versus O
Well,
grade
like
versus
zero
zero
O
grade.
grade versus zero grade. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, you have some other derivatives from the same root in Germanic, like otter, and then same derivatives from the same root in Greek, like hydra.
Yeah, 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 yeah. This is Greek has the ud forms as well. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, the R. I guess that's mostly people relate those to like row adjectives, but it does seem awfully coincidental that the R is there in the paradigm too. So
Mhm.
um, it's a little bit, is it from ud or is it from udder?
Yeah.
From like a thematization. Anyway, those are like weedsy morphological questions that I think only are of a concern to uh, yeah, Indo-Europeanists who have spent too much time thinking about the prehistory of Indo-European inflection and stuff.
Yeah. Well, we've got to have our fun with that kind of thing. Well, we appreciate you coming to talk to us about this. I mean,
Yeah, this has been really fun. I've learned some things and I've enjoyed it. And I think it sounds like we've got maybe some other topics that we can take on. I don't know, when we get some time to meet again later this summer.
yeah, this Hittite website would be really nice to have you do a walkthrough about that to help people access that data better because I mean that would
Boy, do I hope it comes back up and I can give you guys that walkthrough. I'm really, that would be, yeah, I'm concerned, but yes, that would be really fun. I think that would be a good time, and yeah, what part of this, the annoying part of, I mean, I wish that the languages that we love and work on were just a little more accessible, and it's nice to see them moving in this direction. I mean, shouldn't have to take like years of specialty training to be able to like just kind of get at these languages a little
yeah.
bit, and that's definitely where we were at in Hittite until very recently. So yeah, I think it's great.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to that. And sir, thank you again, and I'll wish you the best for the rest of your Sunday and look
Yeah,
forward to.
yeah. Likewise, I look forward to seeing that abstract. I hope, we want to have a good time at that fall conference. It'd be awesome.
All right. I'll get
Okay.
to work on that right now and hopefully see you in October.
Hey, thank you all for the great questions. I really, yeah, once again, I enjoyed this, and yeah, I'll look forward to catching up with you guys soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks, sir.
See
All
ya.
the best.